Hey, what's up? So, in today's video, we're going to, we're going to have a continuation of what we done the last time, which was building a DartFrog application, building backend REST API using DartFrog. So in today's video, we are going to be looking at database and authentication. So what we are going to be doing is that we would connect our backend app and we'll connect that to a MongoDB database, and we are going to implement user authentication, so which includes login and sign up. So let's get started. So you go to open your browser, and you open MongoDB. So assuming you don't have a MongoDB account, you could create a new account for free, and basically you can create a new cluster for free. Make sure I'm not going to go through the steps of creating a new MongoDB cluster in this video, but you can watch another video for that. But just get your new cluster running, and you should be able to set up a new cluster for free though. Although there is a paid version, but you can stick to the free one for now. So you can see I have a cluster, and when you go to database, you will see some statistics and metrics here, but that's not what we want. So what we want to do is you can just click connect. You can click on connect and go to compass. So you copy this connection string. So when you are setting up your MongoDB cluster, you would create a user and password, and that username and password is what you will use to log in here. So when you copy the connection string, you would now replace this username and the password, then you use it to connect to your database. Anyway, so if you don't have MongoDB Compass installed, you can install MongoDB Compass. So just search for MongoDB. So MongoDB Compass, you can install it, or you can even download it from here. So assuming you have MongoDB Compass installed, you can click on this one and you copy your connection string, and so you open MongoDB Compass. So here is MongoDB Compass. So I already have my stuff set up. So I have my email and my username and password. Connect. It's going to take some time, and yeah, connected. So in my database, I have a bunch of collections. So the way MongoDB works is you have a collection and you have documents. So if you check my cats database, my cats collection, for example, I have my cats database. Inside my cats database, I have some collections, and then I have documents inside the collection. So if you check my cats collection, you will see a bunch of documents. So each document is like a JSON, and it has keys and values, keys and values, keys and values. You can check on this one as well. ID, message. So you get the idea. So what we want to do now is we will create a new collection for our, sorry, no. We create a new database called dogs, and let's create a new collection called users. So we are trying to create a collection called users, and in that collection we would create new users. And you know what it takes to create a new user. Each user has an email and password. So let's go to our IDE and So in our root folder, we create a new folder called lib library. So in this folder, we create another subfolder called common. And then in the common directory, we create another directory called model. So in this model, we create a Dart file called user. So user.dart. So this user.dart is going to be our user model. So our user model is just like almost like a schema of how we want our user JSON object to look like. So what do we need in our user model? What we need is usually just username. So let's create a new class, user, curly braces, and so user takes ID, string ID, string name, another string, email, string password. I think that's enough for now, right? So yeah, that should be enough for now. We don't, although we could have so much more, but let's leave it at this for now. And all of this field will be required at first because I mean, yeah, let's make all of them required. And the next thing we want is data serialization. So I prefer to write my data serialization manually. So instead of using freezed or JSON serializer, I tend to write my from JSON and to JSON methods manually. That's my personal preference. And you can create a to JSON that returns a JSON just like that. So also you can create a copy with. I'm going to be doing almost everything manually in this video, so if you're not a fan of that, then too bad for you. I think, well, that's enough for now. So the next thing we are going to do now is, well, okay, so the next thing we will do now is we would try to connect our app to MongoDB. Yeah, we connect our app to MongoDB. So you copy your connection string. So you create a new, so in our root folder, we create in our lib folder, we create a new directory called config. And in the config directory, we create a new file called config.dart. So this is going to be a class config that contains a bunch of constant strings for, so these strings are actually for authentication purposes. These are some authentication secrets. So our MongoDB URL, so you could just go on my GitHub and copy paste this part and make sure you replace it with your MongoDB string. So this is my MongoDB string right here. Well, I think that's enough for now. So the next thing we are going to do now is we would create, so we want to connect our app to MongoDB. So we would go to our pubspec.yaml and we would add these two packages. Jaguar JWT and Mongo dot Mongo dot. So this Jaguar JWT is a package that we use to generate JSON web token for our project, and also Mongo Dart is a package that we use to connect our Dart app to our MongoDB database. So next thing we have to do now is we need to write some helper functions. So we go to our lib folder and so next thing you have to do is you create a new directory called helpers. By the way, you could restructure your code anyhow you like, but just follow this pattern for now. So in the helpers, you create a new dot file called authentication validation. So in this authentication validation, we are going to make use of Mongo Dart import package Mongo Dart. So when you add your package, you need to run pub get. Don't forget, please. So you import Mongo Dart and you create an instance of Mongo service. So you create your class Mongo service. So this Mongo service class is a class that we are going to use to establish a connection to our MongoDB database at the beginning of the app. So this class takes a constructor. Let's use Copilot for this. Initialize would be false, so we have to initialize a connection to MongoDB, but the initialized boolean will be false initially because at first we are not yet connected. So let me just auto put this one. So initialized, you can get initialized, you can check whether we are initialized or not. So get DB, get database. So with this function, we want to check whether we want to get an instance of our database. So if it was not initialized, then we would get a null value. So that's why we have an assertion to know that this database must have been assigned. Otherwise, we won't be able to get an instance of database. So initialize Mongo. So we call this function at the beginning of our app to establish a connection to our MongoDB. So if it's not yet initialized, if it has not yet been initialized, then we would establish a connection. MongoDB DB creates, and we get our MongoDB URL from our config. So this config, we are getting this MongoDB URL that we assigned earlier in our config constant file. So back to the matter. So the next thing we have to do is we set initialize to true to know that it has been initialized, and we open the database. So in MongoDB, you have to open the database, and if you try to access any data from the database when the database is not yet open, you will get an exception. So you must open the database. So let's leave this as a comment for now. So we are now going to define an open database function. So if database is not yet open, then we open it. Otherwise, we just print a message that says it's already open. So if you try to open the database when it has already been opened, then it will throw an exception as well. So I think all the code here is pretty much self-explanatory, and now we can uncomment this line. So the last thing we have to do here is we need to close the database. So as you can see, I've worked on this project before. That's why my copilot already has most of this code in memory. So close. So when you are done with the database, you can close it. But in this app, we won't really be closing our database. But let's just have the function. So in case you're working on another kind of app that, maybe you want to close your database and you don't want to have too much stuff in your memory, you could just dispose the database. So now that we have our class defined, what we do is we would assign and we would basically create an instance of this class and put it in a variable. So this is a global variable, and the thing about this variable, this MongoDB service, is that it's accessible from anywhere in the app. You could just call the name of the variable and you will get access to it without any dependency injection and all. So the reason we make it a global variable is because we need it like almost everywhere in the app, and we don't want to have to pass the data around. So that's why we are doing that. But I won't advise you to just do this on you should only do this if you really really like need to do this. So yeah, that's so the next thing on the line is we need to call this function and see if it works, right? So the way our app works now is when we run DartFrog, dev, I'm trying to configure this thing. Shit, no. So what happens is you go to the terminal and you run DartFrog dev. And what really happens when you run DartFrog dev is that there is a hidden server dot folder here in your .frog hidden folder, and this file is what our DartFrog actually runs. But we don't want to be running this file. We want to actually do some things at the beginning of the app before it starts implementing our routes. So we have to create, what we do is we want to have a main.dot file in our routes that we run directly. So what we are going to do on that note is we'll go to our root and we'll create a main.dot. So you go to main.dot, create your main.dot, then you can now write your regular dot code here. So your main.dot would return. So normally we would have void main, and given that we are writing a REST API, so given that we are writing a REST API, so what we do is we would, in DartFrog, we would have a, so if you check the DartFrog documentation, you will realize that there's supposed to be a run function, like something like this, future. So just instead of typing it out, let me go to the DartFrog documentation, get started, advanced. So when you go to custom server entry, you will see that this is what you want here. You can copy this code and you can paste it. So now you get to have your own custom server entry, and you can remove these comments if you want. So now instead of running our server dot, we could run our main dot. So let's print something over here. Print main running. Yeah, you can see main running. So now the starting point of our app is actually our main dot rather than the hidden server dot file. So this is going to return an HTTP server, and before that we could actually just define our init function. So we could define an async init void function. Init async void function. So this init async void function is going to accept some parameters. So you are going to accept the internet IP address and the ports. So assuming you want to have something to do with all these params, you can basically pass it in when you call your function here. Otherwise, you can just leave it as just an ordinary void function. And so this is where we get to. So we can just print our IP address and the ports just to know that it's working. And the next thing we can do is you remember this MongoDB service, we would call this MongoDB service and MongoDB service import dot initialize Mongo. So this initialize Mongo is just going to take some time to properly establish a connection with our MongoDB server, and once that is done, then we would be able to do other stuff. So after the app gets connected to the MongoDB server, we want to print a message in console that says connected to MongoDB. So we can kill our server now and run it all over again, and it's gonna take some time. See init IP address port 8080. It's gonna take some time, and after some moments you will see connected to MongoDB. So it took some time, and now we have been connected to MongoDB. So at this point, we have successfully connected to MongoDB, and if we try to get some data from our MongoDB, we would be able to successfully do that. So I think we have come to an end of this video. I don't want this video to be too long, but this is basically how to connect your Dart app to MongoDB. So we are going to continue with authentication on another video. As you can see, I already have the user model here, and so what you have to do for authentication is you create an so you go to your route, you create an authentication endpoint, you create one for login, one for register, and the rest is pretty much common sense from there. But we are going to cover all that on the next video, so stay tuned. Peace out. Goodbye. See you on the next video.